Some places are abandoned for a reason, but what if they never truly let you go? Tonight, on Haunted Horizons, we bring you a chilling tale of the Accursed Motel, a place lost in time where reality bends and no guest ever truly checks out. When Ryan and Emily stumble upon the Hollow Creek Motel, they believe it to be just another roadside stop. But strange whispers, ghostly figures, and a cursed neon sign soon reveal the horrifying truth. They were always meant to be there. Trapped in a nightmare that refuses to end, they must uncover the motel's dark secret, or be claimed by it forever. Will they escape? Or will they become part of the motel's endless cycle? Turn off the lights, put on your headphones, and prepare yourself for a terrifying journey into the unknown. Part 1. Welcome to Hollow Creek Motel. The rain battered the windshield like thousands of tiny whispers, each drop muttering secrets as Ryan Carter drove through the endless stretch of highway. The storm had come suddenly, swallowing the moonlight, leaving the road ahead barely visible under his flickering headlights. His GPS had failed miles ago. No signal, no service, just darkness. A neon sign flickered in the distance, glowing red like a heartbeat in the night. Hollow Creek Motel. Ryan let out a sigh of relief. He had been driving for hours, and exhaustion weighed heavily on his bones. Pulling into the empty parking lot, he noticed something odd. There were no other cars. The lot was wet from the rain, but no fresh tire tracks. Yet, the sign flashed VACANCY. He grabbed his overnight bag and stepped into the dimly lit lobby. A musty scent filled the air, thick with something he couldn't place. The walls were lined with outdated floral wallpaper, peeling at the edges. Behind the reception desk, an old-fashioned bell sat atop a faded guest book. Ryan pressed the bell. A sharp ding echoed through the empty motel. A door creaked open behind the desk, and a man stepped out. He was gaunt, his skin sickly pale, eyes sunken and shadowed as if he hadn't slept in years. His lips curled into a smile that never reached his eyes. "Welcome," the clerk rasped, sliding a key across the counter. "Room 103. Ryan hesitated. Do you need my name? Or—" "No need. We've been expecting you." A chill ran down Ryan's spine. "Expecting?" The clerk didn't answer. Ryan took the key and forced a polite nod before heading down the dimly lit corridor. The hallway smelled of damp carpet and something else. Something rotten. As he reached room 103, he noticed the number plate was scratched, as if someone had tried to carve it out. The door creaked open before he even touched it. Inside, the room was plain. Too plain. The bed was perfectly made, the furniture untouched, but there was a thick layer of dust on everything, like no one had stayed here for years. Then, as Ryan dropped his bag on the bed, something shifted in the mirror. Not his reflection, something else, watching him. Ryan sat frozen, his breath shallow as he stared into the mirror. The reflection wasn't right. His room was behind him, but the bed in the mirror looked different. The sheets were torn, the wallpaper peeling, and standing in the corner was a figure, its face obscured by shadows, its limbs unnaturally twisted. Then it moved. Ryan spun around. Nothing there. Heart pounding, he grabbed his phone to call someone. Anyone. No signal. A creak echoed from the bathroom. The door was slightly ajar, the darkness inside swallowing the faint light. He approached slowly, pushing the door open with trembling fingers. A smell hit him. Something putrid. The sink was rusted, The mirror above it cracked, and the bathtub was full of dark water. The surface was still, silent. Then, a ripple. Ryan stumbled back as a hand emerged from the water, long and skeletal, fingers curling against the porcelain. A second hand followed, then a face, pale and bloated, with empty eye sockets and a gaping mouth frozen in a silent scream. The lights flickered, the walls trembled, and a whispering voice crawled through the room. "You shouldn't have come." Ryan couldn't breathe. He couldn't think. His body screamed, "Run!" but his legs were frozen. The breathing grew louder, closer, until it was right next to his ear. A raspy voice whispered, "Get out, before it takes you too." Ryan spun around. The room was empty. His pulse hammered in his ears. He needed to leave. Now he grabbed his bag and yanked the door open. A long, endless hallway stretched before him. The motel had changed. The lights flickered violently. The walls were no longer floral wallpaper, but rotting, wet wood, pulsating like living flesh. The doors lining the hallway were all open. Inside each room were figures standing motionless, staring at him. Then, as one, they stepped forward. Ryan ran. Emily Lawson had no idea that stopping at Hollow Creek Motel would be the last choice she ever made. The moment she stepped inside, the air thickened, pressing against her skin like invisible hands. The reception area was just as Ryan had seen it. A faded guest book, a tarnished bell, and a clerk with hollow eyes. But Emily saw something Ryan never did. The mirror behind the clerk was not reflecting the room. It was showing her, alone, standing in the middle of an endless hallway, the walls rotting, pulsating as faceless figures stepped toward her. Emily turned sharply, but the hallway behind her had disappeared. She was already inside it, the motel itself. Her screams were swallowed by the walls, absorbed like every other soul that had ever checked in. And outside, in the rain, the neon sign flickered once more. Vacancy. Part 2, The Motel's Secret. Emily's screams faded into silence, swallowed by the endless corridors of Hollow Creek Motel. The walls pulsated, shifting like something alive, trapping her inside a maze of rotting wood and shadowed figures. But unlike Ryan, she was not alone. A whisper slithered through the darkness. "It has been waiting for you." Somewhere deep within the motel, something woke up. The air grew colder. A door creaked open, revealing a staircase that hadn't been there before, leading downward. Emily hesitated, but the hallway behind her had vanished. There was no choice. She stepped forward, descending into the shadows below. The deeper she went, the more distorted the motel became. The walls no longer seemed solid, but flickered between realities. One moment she was in a pristine 1950s lobby, the next in a hallway covered in blood-stained wallpaper. Ghostly figures shimmered in and out of existence, staring at her with hollow eyes. She reached the bottom. Before her stood a massive wooden door, its surface covered in deep claw marks and faintly glowing symbols. The air was suffocating. Something was breathing on the other side. Emily reached for the doorknob. It was ice cold. The whispers grew frantic. "Don't open it. You'll let it out. It's been trapped for so long." Her heartbeat pounded in her ears, but she had no other way out. She turned the knob. The door groaned open, revealing a massive, circular chamber. The ceiling was lined with flickering chandeliers, their lights casting eerie, dancing shadows on the walls. In the center of the room, a pit yawned open, endless and dark. and hanging above it was Ryan. He was suspended by ropes of writhing black tendrils, his eyes wide with terror. His lips moved, but no sound came out. Then, from the pit, something stirred. A long skeletal hand emerged, followed by a second. The hands gripped the edges of the pit, pulling up a grotesque figure, tall, emaciated, its face obscured by a veil of shifting darkness, its mouth twisted into a grin far too wide. "You brought me a new guest." The voice was not a sound, it was a sensation, vibrating through Emily's bones. The entity lunged. Emily screamed, dodging just as the pit shuddered violently. Ryan dropped from the tendrils, collapsing onto the cold floor. He gasped for breath, eyes wild with fear. "Run!" Emily grabbed his arm, pulling him up. The entity roared, the entire room shaking. The chandeliers shattered, sending shards of glass raining down. The pit began to expand, swallowing everything. They sprinted toward the door, but the hallway beyond was collapsing, twisting. Rooms folded into each other. Doors led to nowhere. The motel itself was devouring its own existence, and the entity was right behind them. Emily and Ryan turned a corner and slammed into a familiar figure. The motel clerk. He smiled, his face splitting open like cracked porcelain. "You can't leave," he whispered. "You belong to it now." His mouth kept stretching, wider, wider, until it wasn't a mouth anymore, but a gaping, endless void. Ryan grabbed a nearby chair and smashed it over the clerk's head. The figure collapsed into dust, his form dissolving into the air. A door appeared before them, the motel exit. "Go!" Ryan shouted. They lunged for it, just as the entity's skeletal fingers brushed against Emily's ankle. She kicked free, diving through the doorway. They landed outside. Cold rain slammed into their faces. The parking lot was empty. No cars, no clerk, no Hollow Creek Motel. Just an abandoned, burned-out ruin. Ryan sat up, shaking. Emily turned toward where the motel had been. The neon sign still flickered, though now it was half buried in weeds. Vacancy. Then, from behind them, a whisper. "See you next time." Their blood turned to ice. Part 3. The motel never lets go. Ryan and Emily stood frozen, their breath forming thick clouds in the frigid air. The Hollow Creek Motel was gone, reduced to an abandoned ruin swallowed by time. And yet the neon vacancy sign still flickered, its glow impossibly bright against the darkness. Then came the whisper again. "See you next time." A chill slithered up Emily's spine. She grabbed Ryan's arm. "We need to go." Ryan nodded, his face pale, his body still trembling. Together, they turned toward the highway, their footsteps splashing in the puddles left by the storm. But as they reached Ryan's car, they stopped cold. The vehicle was not where he had parked it. Instead, it sat perfectly centered in the lot, as if someone or something had moved it. Ryan hesitated before reaching for the door handle. The second his fingers touched it, the car radio blared to life. Static. Then, through the white noise, a voice crackled. "You left something behind." Ryan yanked open the door and slid into the driver's seat. Emily scrambled in beside him. With shaking hands, he twisted the key in the ignition. The engine wouldn't start. A long, deliberate knock echoed from the back window. Emily let out a strangled gasp, her hands flying to her mouth. Ryan dared to glance into the rearview mirror. A figure stood behind the car. It was him, a perfect replica of Ryan, staring back at him with an empty expression, his eyes hollow voids of shifting darkness. Then the doppelganger smiled. Ryan slammed his foot onto the gas pedal, and the engine roared to life. The car lurched forward, tearing out of the lot, spraying water onto the cracked pavement. The motel and its cursed neon sign disappeared into the rain-soaked night. For miles, neither of them spoke. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, but Ryan's grip on the steering wheel remained white-knuckled. Emily kept glancing into the side mirror, expecting to see something following them. Only when they reached the next town did they finally stop. Ryan pulled into a gas station, his body aching from the tension. Inside, the fluorescent lights hummed loudly. The place smelled of stale coffee and motor oil. Emily grabbed a newspaper from the stand near the door. Her breath hitched. Hollow Creek Motel fire, 1956. Her heart pounded as she scanned the article. The motel had burned down decades ago, trapping the guests inside. But the part that made her blood run cold was the grainy black and white photograph of the victims. Ryan's face stared back at her. Not just Ryan. Her face was there too. Emily stumbled backward, nearly knocking over a rack of snacks. Ryan caught the paper, his fingers trembling as he read the same words. His vision blurred, the letters twisting, morphing, rearranging into a whispering message only he could hear. You never left. The gas station lights flickered. Outside, parked under the dim yellow glow of the street lamp, was Ryan's car. Only now, the Hollow Creek Motel key dangled from the rearview mirror. The radio turned on by itself. Static. Then, Room 103 is ready. Emily grabbed Ryan's hand. They bolted for the exit, but as soon as they stepped outside, they weren't in the gas station parking lot anymore. They were back at the motel. The neon sign blazed. Vacancy. The front door swung open, inviting them in. Inside, the motel clerk stood behind the counter, his porcelain-cracked smile widening. "Welcome back," he rasped. "We've been expecting you."